Okay, so welcome to the digital version of Katmai National Park and Preserve, everyone. I'm Ranger Daniel.
And I'm Ranger Dave.
We're here on the Alaskan Peninsula in a big national park called Katmai. This is the best place in the world to see and enjoy wild bears doing wild things. It's a pretty cool place. We're broadcasting live via explore.org. You can go there and watch bears as you've probably been doing all morning. We're out here on the treehouse platform. We've just been watching bears ourselves for the past couple hours, and now we're going to spend an hour talking to you guys.
Yeah, so the treehouse is a place where people will come and wait, hang out while they're waiting to get on the falls platform. The falls platform is kind of the main destination for Brooks Camp. That's where everybody wants to go to get real close up and still be safe and view these bears fishing for salmon and doing all the wild bear things that they do out there. So this is a place where people can come and hang out and wait. There can be sometimes several hours of a wait time. Lots of people come here and want to have that special moment of hanging out at the falls, and we want to give everyone a chance to do that. So there's an hour limit out there,
So they wait right here during the if you come to visit. This is where you might end up waiting. It's almost like an little outdoor museum or visitor center. We've got a roof over our heads here, and there's some informational displays. And we thought this would be a good place to do this talk, because we want to talk today about what makes Katmai wild, what makes Brooks Camp, what makes these bears wild. Just talk about wildness as an idea, but mostly we'll be answering just general questions about all kinds of things. But we want to run a theme through all of that about what makes this place wild. And so this is a good opportunity for that, because this is one place that maybe isn't so wild.
Right.
The treehouse here.
Yeah, there's a whole walkway out to the falls. It's all elevated to keep a little distance between us and the bears. And so the question is, does that make it still a wild experience?
Yeah, we have a few questions about wildness that we want to ask the audience throughout this. So we'll be asking kind of questions as we go and answering questions as we go. So give us your questions down in the comments, and we'll get them sent to us to our little devices here, and we'll answer those as we go along. But we're also going to ask you to answer some questions in the comments that then we can maybe try and read some of the better ones, or we can maybe feature some of them at the top of the comments later on when we're done. So the first question that we really want to ask the audience is, what makes an animal wild? What makes these bears or the salmon, what makes these animals that we have here in Katmai wild? Are there special traits? You know, what makes them wild and us not wild? Or I just want to hear everyone's thoughts, maybe stories, things like that. Share those, and we'll talk about it as we go.
And is there a range of wildness? You know, are bears more wild than salmon? Are salmon more wild than feral cats or pigeons, or any number of different examples?
A black and white thing or a gradient? That's So we'll be talking about that as we go along. We're also just going to be talking about the general ecology, the general kind of network of life that exists here, because it's a pretty unique ecology that we have here on the Brooks River. So maybe we should just start there, talk about some big picture things, where we're at, what this river is, and what's going on out here, what kind of animals we've been seeing and stuff like that.
Yeah, so just for where we're at, we're on Brooks River. That's the small length river that connects Neck Lake to Lake Brooks. It's a very short river, but it's very important for lots of different animals. The main things people come here to see are bears and salmon. The salmon can spawn in the river. Many of the salmon will swim all the way through the river into Lake Brooks and spawn in some of the tributaries that come in there.
Yeah, how many salmon are we seeing right now? Some people were asking you, how many salmon are there in the river right now? So
we checked out the escapement numbers on the Alaska Department of Fish and Game earlier today. We had a daily escapement yesterday of 100,000 fish. That's brought the total up to 300,000, and that's for the Neck River. Not all of those fish will come to this area, to this exact place.
Right.
About 20%, somewhere in there, that's the estimate, will make it from Neck River all the way up into Brooks Lake itself.
Either way, it's a tremendous amount of fish. It's a lot of fish. And so what does that mean then for the ecosystem? Why is that important?
Well, the salmon feed everything from the top of the scale all the way down to the bottom. They feed us. We take a tremendous number of fish out of Bristol Bay to help feed people. And that's regulated pretty heavily by the Department of Fish and Game to make sure that it's a sustainable fishery, that fish keep coming back every year, and that we keep having this amazing resource year after year. Below that, we've got bears, main food source here in Brooks Camp. Other animals like wolves will come by occasionally and capitalize on an easy meal.
Birds too.
Birds come by. Birds, migratory birds will make this one of their stops. They might breed here. It's a really important place for them as well. Really, everything else down the line also benefits, all the way down to plants and trees. Bears will take the salmon carcass and go off into the forest and eat it there. And then, because of that, all those nutrients from the salmon skeleton will
Soak into the
will
soil.
soak into the soil,
Get
and
absorbed by the tree.
and all this moss and all this really dense ground cover just flourishes because of that.
So we're getting a lot of nutrients, minerals and vitamins and energy, actual calories, brought in from the ocean, from these salmon that are out there feeding on zooplankton and small forms of life that are feeding on algae that is growing from the sun. So all this solar energy, starting with algae and plant life in the ocean, moving up through the food chain into salmon, is then migrating up, eventually hundreds and thousands of miles into the interior of where we are at Alaska, to bring those nutrients from the ocean to all these other different animals. I think I read once that 137 vertebrate species depend on, or at least utilize, salmon, spawning salmon. So it's really interconnected to the whole ecosystem. These salmon are. We think of the salmon here as being the keystone species that everything else really revolves around.
And related to that, a question we get a lot of the time is, what's the difference between a brown bear and a grizzly bear, right? And the main thing there is location. Brown bears, well, I should back up. All grizzly bears are brown bears. It's all the same species, Ursus arctos. They're all brown bears. The difference is grizzly bears are in the interior. They don't have that access to that marine nutrition, that high calorie, high protein, good food. They're eating more vegetation, berries, roots, small rodents, things like that.
Scavenging carcasses.
Right. The specific brown bears are out on the coast, and because of their location, they have access to all that food. Salmon, clams, marine mammals, all kinds of different stuff that comes from the ocean. And then because of that, they're able to grow much larger than a grizzly bear.
And it changes their disposition too.
Exactly.
Because they have so much more food, so much easier access to calories, they end up in general being a little bit more sociable, a little bit more tolerant of each other, and sometimes a little bit more tolerant of people. At least that's the case here in Brooks Camp, where we have them a lot.
And all brown bear populations, all bear populations are a little different, right? Between coast and inland, and even different populations along the coast, they'll have different behavioral tendencies.
Yeah. So yeah, we have a lot of bears here. We'll see sometimes up to 30 or 40 individuals here on the river, and they're working to catch these salmon that are coming in from the ocean. And they're out there fishing at the falls and in the rapids or down in the lower river, and you can watch that happening on the explore.org cams. You might actually even catch a glimpse of David here trying to catch a salmon. A lot of so I know people have been asking if you've caught one yet.
Yeah, I finally did.
You finally caught one.
Yeah, I caught two.
You caught two salmon already.
Two salmon so far, yeah. One
So
after the other.
a
Very
lot of
very
them-
proud about that.
Yeah. Were they big ones?
One was a little bigger than the other. So one big one medium-sized one. They're all pretty big.
Have you eaten them yet?
They're in my freezer right now.
Oh,
I'm
you
gonna save them for when family and friends come over.
yeah.
Yeah. One thing that the bears don't do, I will share.
That's
But the bears will not.
Bears are not big on sharing.
So, talking about whether animals are wild or not, the salmon here we always refer to as wild salmon versus hatchery.
Or farm
Hatchery.
race salmon.
Right. So,
Because on the along different places in the coast, all around the world actually, from Argentina to the west coast of the United States to in parts of northern Europe, they farm salmon, mostly Atlantic salmon, in large nets and outdoor in the ocean, in bays and everything. They farm salmon. This is a different situation here. We have no farm salmon in Bristol Bay, and we have no hatchery salmon in Bristol Bay. All of the salmon that run up this river do so by their own accord.
So they're born here as eggs. They turn into alvin. They'll be hanging out in the gravel for how long?
Over the winter.
Right. So over the winter they'll be hanging out as alvin in the gravel. Then they'll come out as fry, and then eventually they'll make their way as smolt back out into the ocean. They'll spend 2 or 3 years there, moving around in the currents. It'll take about a year for them to go in this big circle.
They call it a gyre.
Right. The North American gyre.
Yeah.
So they'll spend 2 or 3 years going around there eating zooplankton mainly.
Yep.
And
so that whole time they're not breeding, they're not doing any other parts of their life. The whole purpose of that is to utilize those marine resources and grow as big and strong as they can, because then when it comes time to return, and they return by using both magnetic senses that they have built in to find their way back to their home stream that they were born in, and then once in that stream using olfactory senses, using the sense of smell and taste in the water to find sometimes the exact little gravel bed that they were born in. And so they're going back to that, and once they start doing that, they're not eating anything that whole time. They fast for the whole rest of their life as they go into spawn.
yeah. And one of the things that people might talk about when deciding whether or not an animal is wild, whether or not a process is wild, is does that animal have the ability to migrate? Does it have the ability to move around freely as it would, uninhibited by humans, uninhibited by anything we do?
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. There's a lot of questions that we could all wrestle with there. Like, I mean, your goldfish is, a domestic, it's your pet, but it doesn't know its name. It doesn't obey any command that you might give it, and it does live its life entirely as much as it can to its own will. Like, so is it a wild animal? It's not a trained animal,
right?
So I'm not sure. That's something we can all wonder about, I guess. There's not a real solid answer, maybe. Yeah. So let's see if we have some questions here. We'll try and find a salmon question. So we asked, what do salmon eat? Zooplankton, for the most part. And then maybe we could talk about how they don't eat when they're here, but they do grow some pretty big teeth.
Yeah. And that's to kind of defend their zone, right? They want to be the ones who spawn in their specific spawning ground. If there's a lot of salmon, there's going to be a lot of competition for space to breed.
So they call that, when they grow those, a kite. Their nose and their jaw will elongate and curve up and get a lot stronger. So much so that actually even now in the summer, from when we walk down on the beach, it's very common to find those jawbones. It's maybe the strongest part of the salmon skeleton. It's the only thing left over from last year. So we find those jawbones from the fish that died last summer. They're still laying out there on the beach, and you can look at these big jagged teeth that they have. And they're not for eating. They're for defense and for fighting off other fish from their breeding territory there that they have. I've heard of people wading in the rivers, even if they get too close to a really defensive spawning salmon, that you can get bit, and that it seems like it might hurt.
Good time to be wearing waders, I guess.
Yeah. So someone asked us the riffles when they're watching the Brooks Falls camera.
Oh right, yeah.
Are we watching rapids there? Are those rapids and riffles, or is it some of that fish swimming up? Are those salmon?
So it's definitely both,
okay.
Right? You'll see when you're looking at a salmon in the water, you'll kind of see that same rapid, but it'll be moving upstream generally. The water is pretty shallow there, so much of that is just natural water going over the rocks. And you can look at the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. You can see when these big surges of fish are coming in, and they're being counted on the Neck River, so it'll take a day or two for them to get here. But if you see a big surge of fish on that website,
You know it's coming.
and if you watch the riffles, you'll probably see salmon swimming up.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think maybe right now it's sometimes a better place to see the salmon jumping and see them in the river is actually maybe on the lower river cams. Yesterday when I was out there, I was watching, they sometimes just porpoise constantly. You'll see a lot of them doing that. So if you see any fish jump on the lower river, it's probably going to be
a salmon. Yeah.
Sometimes they really flop out of there erratically, but they're not feeding. Like if you saw a trout do that, it would be jumping up probably to catch a bug in the air. These salmon are not doing that.
And we really don't know exactly why they're jumping.
Why they jump?
It might be just out of aggression. They might be showing off their strength.
Or anxiety.
Right.
I don't know.
But the answer is we really just don't know why they're doing that, because they're not rising to the surface to feed like a trout would.
I wonder if that's maybe an indication of something being wild, is that you don't understand why it's doing something. If you see a behavior in an animal that it's doing for its own reasons.
Right. And we can always try to find out. We can always investigate it, and we can always come up with ideas to why that might be. But there's a certain amount of mystery there in wild animals that, that might help define it.
Speaking of jumping and salmon and everything, last night we were watching. The salmon have been jumping like crazy at Brooks Falls, and so if anyone's watching on the Explore cams, they're watching the Falls cam. They're probably seeing a lot of salmon trying to jump up that waterfall. So maybe you can tell us about why are they jumping up that falls, and how successful are they? Because sometimes it seems like they're jumping in completely the wrong direction.
Right. Yeah. So there's really just one small area where the salmon are successfully able to jump the falls, and that's right where the jacuzzi is. That's that really big pool of white bubbles.
Where it foams up.
Right. And so that's the only place that they can get up, because the water's deep enough that when it comes down, it comes down, hits the bottom, and then rises back up, and they can use that upward motion to give themselves a little boost and get up the falls. And it might take them a lot of tries to get up the falls. You can see if you look really closely, you might not be able to see this on the cams, but if you're looking really closely, you can see when they jump up, a little dark movement move up when they do make it.
Sometimes, so you can see that, yeah. This is kind of a hard question, maybe you can ballpark it, but what percentage of the jumps at the falls are successful? That's something that the cam viewers could help us actually. You can see the fish jumping as well as we can. Just count it and do a little percentage.
Yeah, and I know there have been people in the past, I believe Mike Fitz in the past has tried to keep a tally, and he'll sit for hours and watch to see how many make it. I think it's around like 1 in 8 is what he had told me. Okay. You can't quote me on that number because
that feels about right. That it's somewhere in that ballpark. So someone gave us an interesting answer to some of the questions we've been asking about what makes an animal wild. So the commenter said that an animal is wild when it is living by internal instinct only, with no human interference. So that's kind of an interesting thing when we're talking about salmon and their migration back into rivers, that humans are not showing them the way.
Right.
If anything, but it's not that we're not interfering, because the fish are being interfered with by humans at the mouth of the river, right?
They are, yeah. I mean, with the technology that we have in fishing, we could take out every fish. We could harvest every single fish that goes through the water, through that bay. But we don't, because we know if we do that, they'll never come back. They won't come back the next year. So how much influence is that? We're controlling how many fish are allowed to go back in, which is a good thing. But at the same time, does that make them not wild? Does that make them less wild? I don't know.
Interesting question. Yeah. Something to ponder. Well, so there's some other questions about wildness and everything, but I think it'll start taking us away from salmon. We can start talking a little bit more about bears for a bit.
Yeah.
So I guess if you're just tuning in, I'm Ranger Daniel.
And I'm Ranger Dave.
We're here in Katmai National Park. We're on the Alaskan Peninsula. Out here, it's a cold day. We're all bundled up. It's been raining a lot the past couple of days. We're on the treehouse platform, looking out, into the forest behind us. And out here, we have boardwalks leading to our falls and riffles platforms, where if you're watching the cameras at other times, you're going to be seeing those areas on the cams. And so we're just going to be answering questions as we go along today about the ecology and how things work here in Katmai National Park. We're going to be answering any questions that you leave for us in the comments, and we're going to be asking you guys some questions. We're trying to think about wildness and what makes an animal wild. So any questions about that kind of thing, yeah, we'd love to answer those today. So should we talk about bears now?
Yeah.
I think people are ready to talk about
So,
bears.
so I saw one question. What else do bears eat other than salmon?
Oh, that's a good question. And what don't bears eat?
That's a better. Yeah, exactly. That's a better question.
The list is huge and always growing.
Right.
Because bears are omnivores, and they are intelligent creatures that are always on the lookout for what is food and what is not food. And a lot of that seems to be learned behavior, not instinct necessarily. It's something that their mothers teach them. So you'll see cubs a lot of times eating things, random things off the ground, putting things in their mouths, just like human children.
Yeah.
Learning what is food, what is not food. And humans are also omnivores, so there's some parallels there maybe. So one of the things I've seen the bears eating a lot, especially early in the season, is grasses and vegetation. We see them eating horsetail grass, and then just the regular grass. They seem to like the new shoots of grass a lot more. They're not grazing on these big, tall. We have grass here that's as tall as me, and they don't seem to eat that nearly. They're going for the new shoots, and then they're scavenging for any other kinds of things they can find. They eat a lot of berries, small mammals, things like that. I've heard of them raiding bird nests that are on the ground, like waterfowl nests, eating those eggs. Yeah.
Yeah, and bears on the coast will even swim out to islands that are a few miles away, and they'll raid seagull nests. Seagulls think that they're safe out on an island, which I would think they'd be pretty safe out there too. But bears can swim pretty well, and so they'll head out there and just pretty much clean house. That can be a really important food source, marine food source
There's a
for
lot
brown
of
bears.
marine food sources for our bears, actually. Not necessarily here in Brooks Camp, but on the coast of Katmai, on the edge of the Alaskan Peninsula there, we get bears digging for clams. We have a video of a bear catching a flounder, apparently out of the surf, and eating a flounder, an ocean-going fish. So the link between these bears and coastal resources is strong.
Yeah.
But maybe we could talk about the Coastal Research Project. We don't know exactly how strong that connection is.
Yeah, so we're trying to find out exactly, where are these bears going? Are they traveling a lot on the coast? Are they coming all the way in here and coming back? Are they separate populations? What are they eating out on the coast? How does climate change, how do the things we do affect what these bears can access?
So those are questions we're trying to ask with this this Changing Tides research project. This is a several-year research project that Katmai National Park is doing right now, and we're looking to answer those questions. One of the ways that the Chief of Resources here explained it was, we know that the bears are eating, they're eating clams and flounder sometimes and these other marine resources, but we don't know if they're eating them like they eat the salmon here in Brooks Camp, or if they're eating them like you might eat a bag of peanuts just because, hey, it's there, I'll snack on it. So what level of dependence do they have on that?
Right.
That makes me think of the wildness thing again, that these bears are choosing to eat different things at different amounts and in ways that we don't have anything to do with. In case anyone's wondering, no, we don't feed the bears here. They choose what to eat on their own.
Yeah, and they definitely don't need us to feed them.
Right.
They can gain up to a pound a day in the summer, gorging on these salmon.
And they need to.
Yeah, and they need to. An adult male successful big bore brown bear can eat up to 30 salmon a day. Each one of those has 4,500 calories, so more calories than we would probably eat in an entire day, just in one fish. And they'll do that up to 30 times in one day. That's incredible.
That is really incredible. Well, that makes me, so we don't feed the bears and we don't need to. That's someone else was asking about some of why we don't do certain things with the bears. So you answered why we don't feed them. Why don't we help injured bears? These are all questions that have to do with wildness and what makes an animal wild and what our relationship should be with a wild animal. So yeah, someone asked, why don't you help injured bears?
So one of the main tenets of the Park Service is to preserve natural processes. And a really good example of why we might want to do that is a particular bear, 89, his nickname is Backpack, if you're familiar with him. He was injured as a cub, and a lot of people thought that bear is not going to make it. Typically when bears are severely injured, when they can't move around, they can't feed themselves, that's a bear that's probably not going to make it into adulthood. 89 had an injured leg, and he was having a really hard time getting around, and especially as a cub, that's kind of a big blow to your chances of survival. So there were a lot of people that said, well, maybe we should help that bear. We should take him out. We should, kind of put him in captivity, feed him, make sure he at least lives. If we had done that, he would not have been able to live his wild, natural life. And today he's one of the most successful bears out there. He's a medium-sized bear, so he's still growing. He's about 10 years old, but he's completely healed from his injury, and you can see him on the cams catching fish pretty much all day.
Yeah, so it for one, that speaks to the resiliency and the adaptability and just sheer toughness that these animals have. Bears are incredibly tough. If anyone's been watching, one of our bears here that we've been seeing at the falls a lot has some really nasty wounds right now. But that bear shows up looking about like that every year with these big nasty wounds, and every year it heals and continues on to grow. So they're pretty darn resilient. But I think that some of the answer to that, why don't we interfere with bears, when they're injured, or why don't we feed them, the answer has to do with what we want this place to be. And because if we want it to be a zoo, then we could do that, where they feed and treat animals and things. But so far the going idea is that national parks should not be zoos. That these are places for wild animals to exist independently from humans to at least some extent, or as much extent as we can. So that's something that I'd love to hear people's thoughts about in the comments, is where is that line between a zoo and a national park? Because we have some features here that can seem kind of zoo-like. We have these boardwalks, we have this treehouse, we have a wait list, and we have a viewing platform where you can look down very predictably at large bears, much like you would do in a zoo. So I guess I would love to hear what everyone thinks, and maybe what you think. Does that mean that this place is a little bit less wild, or is it just does it feel less wild to us, but to the bears it's just as wild?
I think to answer that question, we have to kind of pose another question. Would be, are we wild? Right? Because if we're just like anti-wild, then us being here, just the fact that we're here makes this place less wild. But if we consider ourselves part of this wild landscape, we're animals too. What's to say that makes it any less wild with us being here and doing the things that we naturally do? It's natural for us to build a treehouse and have a wait list. That's what people do. We do unnatural things, and that's natural.
It gets so confusing. But I think it's maybe a good point to throw in the reminder there that this seems more black and white to people, that this is not a natural thing. We're on this big platform elevated, but humans have been living here at Brooks Camp for over 9,000 years. That this place humans are not new to this place. There is a deep and rich historical human history here that would not exclude bears. That humans and bears have been interacting here and then I guess it's for us to decide whether that interaction was natural or unnatural.
Right. And the people who lived here, they were probably chasing bears away because they depended on the fish to live. They needed to harvest as many fish as they could in the summertime so they could survive over the winter. And so to do that, they have to keep bears away from the fish that they have drying on these big, huge racks.
It would have been dangerous to have bears around.
Absolutely. They wouldn't have been able to survive. And even today, we have people who still use the same kind of subsistence lifestyle, and they'll harvest large numbers of fish in the summertime. And what they'll do is they'll have these almost like security guards for bears, where they'll have maybe air horns or a shotgun with bean bags or some other way to deter bears from coming up on their salmon harvesting site. So they're doing the same things with modern means, but they're still living that same life and contributing to the natural process that's always been there.
This tension between what we think of as wild animals and us, what we think of as maybe less wild, more civilized animals.
Civilized animals, yeah.
So there's some more answers to what makes an animal wild here. One person said that an animal is wild because of their natural fear and lack of dependence on humans. I kind of like that. I think that's an interesting idea that I don't maybe fully understand what they're saying with natural fear. Maybe their natural fear of humans. That's an interesting thing to talk about here,
right?
Because are the bears afraid of us here?
Some of them are. Some of them avoid us. Some of them don't care at all.
Some of them clearly have no fear of humans, and will approach humans, will approach human structures, will spend lots of time around us, around our housing, and it can. I'm the one feeling the fear there. I think.
Right.
I think last time maybe you should tell that story again of when that bear walked up the path near you, and I got the picture of it.
Right. Yeah. So I was on my way to work, and I heard on the radio. People call out on the radio where a bear is if it's coming through camp, so people can kind of get out of the way. I was right next to a building, one of the cabins here, so I figured, okay, well, I'll stay right here where it's kind of safe, and I'll just watch this bear go by. Maybe I can get a cool picture. And so the bear's walking parallel to the lake along the beach there, and there's a trail that runs adjacent to the lake, and that's kind of where I am next to this building. The bear appears through the forest on the beach, takes a look at me, and kind of looks like I could just see in his eyes. He's like, he's no problem. I can walk that way.
He wasn't afraid of you.
Right, wasn't afraid of me at all. And so he just came right my way, and I had to just step off the trail and
out of the way as quick as you could.
Right, yeah, and that was too close for me.
Your heart was pounding.
Definitely felt some fear there. But the bear clearly did not. So does that mean it's less wild?
That's an interesting question. If a bear is not afraid of people, or not afraid of human structures, if a bear comes and chews on our porches or on our treated wood, as some of the bears here sometimes do, is that a wild behavior? The bears are naturally very investigative and curious. Well, so someone asked an interesting question here. They're asking about a bear known as Divot. Do you know this story?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is an example maybe where we did interfere.
Right. And the reasoning there is we interfered because it wasn't a natural process.
Yeah, so maybe we should tell the story a little bit about
Right. So one of the bears here, 854, I believe is the number, Divot is the nickname. She, I believe it was during August, she left the river like many bears do when the fish are no longer running in this pre-spawn state. So a lot of the bears leave and seek out other food sources. This particular bear, Divot, she went almost all the way out to King Salmon, about 30 miles away. And so she was looking for another food source because salmon aren't here anymore.
Right.
Natural thing to do. She came across a wolf snare that had been set.
So it's a cable hung in the trees or in the bushes in a circle that when an animal walks through it then cinches down and tightens, catches the animal.
And as time goes on, that will cinch down tighter and tighter and tighter.
There's no one doing it unless you have opposable thumbs, at the very least, maybe some tools.
Right. And so it's designed to keep a wolf attached to the tree so the hunter can come back and the trapper can come back and collect it. Wasn't designed for a bear. The bear snapped it at the end, but it was still cinched around the neck. So we saw this bear walking around the Brooks Camp area with this snare around its neck. So the Park Service decided to intervene and to kind of undo that unnatural process.
Yeah, this is really kind of at the heart of this discussion about wild versus human versus what is a natural process, because the National Park Service, Katmai included, is here to preserve natural processes. So Divot got this snare around its neck, and we decided that was not a natural process that we are not here to protect.
Right.
And that we had unfairly interfered, or humans had unfairly interfered with Divot's wildlife.
Right.
And that we should tranquilize the bear, pull the snare off, and then let the bear go about its life.
Right.
Its wildlife.
And in hindsight, it was a great decision because that bear is now back to living its wild life, doing wild things.
We can see what the commenters think, if they think
True.
it's a good decision or not. But the bear is still alive and is very successful now, doing well.
Yeah.
So let's see what other questions we've got here. Some people have been asking about the changing tides study that we were talking about earlier. Maybe we should round up some of those questions real quick. Someone asked if any of the bears are being tagged for that study.
So they're being tagged. They're being given radio collars.
Yep.
So that we can track their movement. We can kind of track what they're doing, what the patterns of movement are. And then at the end of the study, we attempt to, again, sedate them and take the collar off. If that's unsuccessful, sometimes it's not possible to recapture the bear. In that case, there is an automatic device on the collar that after a certain amount of time it will release itself automatically. So that helps to ensure that once the study's over, that bear can go back to its business as if nothing had happened.
And they can go, the researchers can go and find that.
Collect the collar, collect the data, be on their way.
Yeah. So are they tagged? Yeah, kind of. Not with an ear tag like that. We should also maybe make it more clear that as far as we know, none of those bears in that study are the bears that you see on the cans or
Right.
that are down here at the river.
Right.
That is one of the things the study will hopefully answer is, for sure, are these some of the same bears? Are the bears here at Brooks River ever going over the mountains down to the coast? Or are they completely separate populations? We
Right.
want to look at how much overlap there is. But so you probably won't be seeing a bear on the cams with a radio collar on.
Right. Almost definitely not. From what the results have been thus far, those bears tend to stay on the coast.
It seems to be
From what we-
not too much overlap.
Right.
But that's maybe speaks to that wildness thing, that we were talking about. Wildness is an animal's ability to do and go wherever it wants to go. An animal's ability to travel or migrate at its own free will. And so that our bears on the coast are wild. They can cross over the mountains if they want and
Right.
come and fish at the Brooks River and then cross back over the mountains and dig up clams for the rest of the summer.
Physically, they're capable of doing
Very
that. They can
capable.
travel that far.
Yes, without a problem. Without a problem at all.
And one of the benefits of looking at the bears through the cams here is it's a very confined area that these bears are congregating in. So we're able to follow their life histories. We're able to identify them year after year as they come back. Out on the coast, it's a much larger area. It's much more difficult to track what these bears have been doing from year to year without something like a radio collar. If it was another confined space, those kind of tracking devices wouldn't be necessary.
Right.
But on such a large scale with so many bears, such a large space, in order to learn about them, that's what needs to be done.
Yeah. So, if you're just joining us, I'm Ranger Daniel.
And I'm Ranger Dave.
We're here in Katmai National Park. This is a national park, very large, twice the size of, it's larger than Yellowstone and Yosemite combined. So it's a very big national park.
4 million acres.
4 million acres. Huge, and we're on the upper end, the northern end of the Alaskan Peninsula that comes down into the Bering Sea and the Pacific Ocean. And we are talking about bears, salmon, and the natural ecology of what we have right here, the Brooks River. This is a short river that connects two big Alaskan lakes, and it's the best place, I think, in the world to view and experience wild bears doing wild things, and
Definitely
to
one of
see
them.
wild salmon doing wild stuff too.
Yep.
And so we're answering your questions about that this hour. We're going to be wrapping things up at 2 o'clock Alaska time, and we're asking a few questions along the way too. We're trying to think and talk about wildness here and what that means without getting too formal about it. So someone was asking on here about the salmon. Should we jump back to salmon a little bit?
Yeah, let's do that.
So, how did you catch your salmon? Maybe you don't want to reveal your fishing secrets, but because it can get competitive down there. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the fishing. But what they meant was if these fish are not eating, these sockeye salmon are migrating from the ocean where they've just spent the past couple of years getting fat, and now they're migrating up to these headwater streams that they were born in, where they're going to reproduce and then die. But that whole time that they're in freshwater, they're not eating. And we explained that earlier. How do you catch one then?
Well, the trick to that, there's no secret. There's just so many salmon that what happens is you cast your line upriver. It'll float back down, and what you're hoping is that there's a fish stationary there in the water, looking upstream, and is opening and closing its mouth as it breathes through its gills. And what you're hoping will happen is your hook will float down and just go right into its mouth. Just float right in.
And is that what always happens?
No. No. I spent several days fishing, and that didn't happen at all. And so it's really just just a numbers game. I think you're just trying to spend as much time out there casting as many times as you can, and hoping hope that you're fishing during a time when there's a lot of fish coming into the river, and they're all swimming up, and you can just grab one and have a good meal out of it.
Yeah, and we touched on it earlier, that something about this being a wild process, that these salmon are migrating on their own. No one's showing them where to go. They're not raised in a hatchery. They're not farmed salmon. These are wild animals that migrate by their own instinct back to these headwater sources, and that I think is maybe one of the most special things about
Yeah, it's very, and there's other places in the world, in the United States, where we actually boat salmon from below a dam above it so that they can go on their way to spawn.
Or up through fish ladders, and the populations in the lower 48 are often supplemented by hatchery fish, so that having a natural run, what we call natural salmon migration, a wild migration of salmon, is a special thing that isn't universal. It's not a guaranteed thing. It's something that can be lost if we don't take care of it or watch out for it. So it is a really special thing, and it's maybe one of my favorite things about Katmai, because it's the keystone that holds everything else together.
And it's not something that we've created. We didn't create the keystone to Katmai.
Right.
It's always been there, and it's always worked.
Yeah, and so I guess we mentioned the numbers of that a little bit earlier, but we could talk that the numbers of sockeye salmon in this river is measured in right now probably in the tens of thousands, but that the escapement goal, the amount that the fishing game hopes to allow through the commercial fishing down in the bay, they hope to allow 800,000 to 2 million fish this year to escape up into the system.
Into this river.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a tremendous amount of fish. And that is why the bears are able to catch them and grow so fat. So I wanted to read a comment, though, here that someone shared about wildness. I haven't read it all the way through, but it looks really good here. So, humans will not save or help or care about other animals they know nothing about. A place like Brooks Camp allows humans to get to know and care about these bears in their natural setting. We, even watching the cams, come to know and care about these animals. We worry and laugh and cry through the seasons as we watch the bears go about their lives. Because we care, we are willing to put some effort and time and money into making sure these bears are allowed to continue to exist in this wild setting. That's important.
I think that's very well said.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, I thought, was a really good transition to a question the second question we wanted to ask.
Right.
The first question, what was the first question that we asked the audience?
What makes an animal wild?
What makes an animal wild? And we've got some really good answers about for that question as we went along. But we wanted to close with a question that ties into really well. Why is wildness important, or is wildness important? Why or why not? Are there pros and cons? Is it kind of important? Why is wildness important? So answer that in the comments, and we will, if we like some of the comments, we can feature them for everyone to see. We're going to share some of those once we're done with this chat here.
Yeah, and as you think about that, as you wrestle with that, we'll wrap up and answer a couple more questions.
Yeah, we've got a few more.
I got one here. What's the SCA patch here? I'm on an internship with the Park Service here through the SCA. That's the Student Conservation Association. They're a really great organization who helps put students and young people into positions with the Park Service, with the Forest Service, with wildlife refuges, get people out in these wild places. And it's number one, it's a great way to get into these organizations. A great way to eventually get a job with the Park Service, for instance. And it's also it gives people these just amazing experiences.
Yeah.
I feel extremely lucky to be able to be here in Katmai National Park. Not very many people get to come here, even less get to work here or spend an entire season or multiple seasons here. So I feel extremely lucky. If you want to know more about the SCA, you can check them out, Student Conservation Association. Just Google that and you can find out all kinds of stuff on their website.
Yeah, maybe I can talk about some of my patches here too, but I want to say, yeah, student conservation. If you're a student and you're watching right now, we want to hear from you in the comments. That would be awesome. So definitely something, if you're a student, be looking into this. Google that. We'd love to have you out with us next summer. That would be awesome. So young people, students, I know you're watching. I hope you're commenting too. But so yeah, that's why we have different colors of uniforms. We're both rangers here, but I work for the National Park Service, for the Department of Interior, part of the United States federal government. This is my 9th season. I work as a seasonal ranger out here, and I've worked in a few other parks before this. So that's kind of the difference there, I guess. We're both doing a lot of the same stuff, though, jumping through, trying to manage all of this together. So I have a few questions left here about some bear things. If we wanted to talk about, maybe we can talk about some of the things that some of the bears and salmon are going to be doing. What are we going to be seeing in the coming weeks, and as the summer goes on? Where we're at right now, we're starting to see the salmon really jump like crazy. Just really in the past couple of days is when we've been seeing the salmon jump like this.
Right.
And we've been starting to see what I would call crowds of bears at the falls. You've been seeing a lot of sows with cubs down at the lower river. Things are really starting to pick up. So what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks, and then what's going to be happening in August?
So as more fish come, so will more bears, so will more people. What you might notice at times when the fish are really just jumping out of control, almost, it seems, you might see periods where there's almost no bears at the falls, and you might think, what is going on? They're missing all the fish. What's happened there is that the bears have caught so many fish that they have to go take a nap. They've become completely satiated, and they're just too full to eat anymore. And that's not by accident. That's by evolutionary design. The salmon run all in these huge, big groups so that predators like bears, like birds, like wolves, they'll eat as much as they can, and then they have to stop. They just become overwhelmed with the sheer number of fish swimming up the river that they can't catch them all. So that ensures survival and ensures reproduction on the part of the salmon.
So it's like a numbers game, like you were saying, for you catching them as well.
Right, yeah. I can't catch all the fish if they're all just overwhelming me.
Yeah. So in the next few weeks, then, these salmon are going to continue to move upstream. They're going to continue to go through this river into Brooks Lake and then into the tributaries of the lake, and they're going to be finding the gravel bed where they were born. And as they do that, their skin is actually going to absorb their scales. They're going to turn red. The sockeye salmon turn a bright red, and their heads and their faces, and they turn green. And they'll be growing they're growing those big teeth that we talked about earlier, and they're going to be preparing to breed, and then after that they will die. They will slowly die. They will wash downstream and be moving downstream out of the river system as that happens. But the females will stay around and defend their nest as long as they can until they grow too weak, and they'll be moving down. The bears are going to be following that, right?
Right. And just real quick, the salmon dying, that's also by no accident. So their bodies will then go on to feed all kinds of things, especially their offspring. So what happens is all that meat that is now in the river, those little particles, all those nutrients will feed the zooplankton. So we get this huge bloom, and then the fry that come out the next year have all this food to eat because the zooplankton has been so nourished by their parents' bodies.
It's a constant cycle. And so the bears, we see them catching the fish at the salmon at the falls now,
right.
But we're going to be seeing them fishing for salmon even in later in the summer, once the salmon have spawned out, as we say, once they're red, once they've reproduced and they're dying. The bears are still going to be trying to catch them, but it's going to look a little different.
Right. Yeah. So they're going to be catching the salmon that are moving upriver now. Come August, like we said earlier, those bears will disperse to other areas. They'll try to go to these small tributary creeks where the fish are again easy to catch because they're in this small confined area, like they are in front of Brooks Falls. And so, well, we're hoping, no promises here, but we're hoping to try to get out of the Brooks Camp area at some point and try to take you to those places. I don't know if that's going to be possible or not. It's something I would really like to do. Yeah. So stay tuned for that. And then after August, the fish that have already spawned will kind of be floating back down the river, and what we'll see then is a lot of bears in the mouth of the Brooks River,
where the current is slower.
right, and
steeper.
where all those fish kind of come and just float by, and they're exhausted, so they can't move very fast.
They can't escape.
They can't get away from the bears. So you'll be able to see another big boom in the visible population of bears. More so at the mouth of the river down by the lower platform. So that's going to be the camera you want to really tune in to come September, come fall.
Yep. So I guess we could say that by that time, then the human fishing is largely done. Maybe it's a testament to our unwildness, to the more civilized side of the human animal, is that once those salmon turn red, they've diminished a lot in calories and in size. Humans don't like to eat them.
And really, they just don't taste as good. that is the main thing. Because if they were a little less nutritious and they still tasted delicious, I didn't mean to rhyme just now, but we would still eat them.
Yeah.
I would.
The bears don't seem to mind.
Right.
Anyway.
It's still calories. It still allows them to pack on that extra bit of weight for the winter so they can survive for another year.
So someone asked if we can show one of those salmon skulls next time. And
oh, totally.
yeah, it's not really the full skull. Most of it seems like the top of the bears eat the top of the skull.
Right, they'll eat the brain, one of the highest protein areas. Yeah. So probably not as much right now, but this will start soon once the bears are getting more and more fish, and they don't. It's no longer kind of economically beneficial for them to spend the energy of eating the entire fish, spending the time of eating the entire fish. They'll eat just the best parts, just the parts that are highest in fat, highest in protein. So that's going to be the skin, the eggs, and the brain. So you'll see a real successful bear, maybe a bear like 747, 856, you'll see him catch a fish, bring it over out maybe to the island, maybe somewhere else, and he'll just rip the skin off, eat the eggs if it's a female, and take a bite out of the brain, and go back and get another one.
And leave the carcass there for the gulls, for other bears to come, for young bears to try and steal away,
right.
for other animals, or just maybe for the trees to absorb over time. So that's something to be watching. If you're watching the cams, I don't know that we've seen too much we call that high grading. They just eat the highest grade of the fish. So that's be something to watch for. We haven't seen too much of it yet. People can be posting screenshots and everything in the comments when we start really seeing a lot of high grade eating going on. Maybe some viewers have already been seeing it.
Yeah, maybe. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
So far I've seen bears just absolutely inhale their fish, but I think that will definitely start happening soon.
Yeah. All right, so as we're wrapping up now, just want to remind everyone, so yeah, we're rangers here in Katmai National Park. We're doing this live broadcast through the webcams provided by explore.org. They have a bunch of other webcams, but I think these bear cams are the best. We have a bunch of them around Katmai National Park.
We think they're the best.
Yeah.
They're all good.
And so you can go to explore.org, you can watch those cams, and every now and then we'll be jumping on to do live chats like this where we answer questions, maybe ask some questions.
We'll try to be here at least once a week, get on other platforms and try to talk to you in every way we can.
Yeah. So be checking in with us on social media and be checking in on these cams, because we're going to be trying to do a lot of things, especially here in July when the season is really busy.
Yep.
So before we wrap up, I just wanted to remind everyone of that question that we want to ask you, and then you can answer in the comments. Really, we want to know what is important about wildness. What is the value of it?
Why should we protect it? Why should we keep it?
Yeah. What makes wildness a good thing? Yeah. And so you can answer that, and then if we get some real good answers, we'll feature those at the top, and we'll be taking suggestions for other kinds of chats like this that we can be doing, other subjects that we can go on. So why is wildness important? Why or why not? And give us your thoughts on that, and I guess we'll talk to you next time.
All right, see you guys.
Thanks.